if it really is an intelligent force that made us to think the way it thinks, why would it have war? Why would it have murder? Why would it have all the horrific crimes that we see?
If you have a fully benevolent, all-powerful God, why suffering? My answer is because God wants real love to exist, and that can't exist with robots. To take away the dignity of humans to make a choice, I think is wrong. Which I think is what Meyer's getting at, which is say, yes, there are predetermining factors. There are factors that seem to push you in the direction of making a bad choice, but you still choose. Here's Joe Rogan talking to a devout Christian. We're going to listen to parts and see what happens.
So this next one, I have it listed as evil. So let's see. So I think they're talking about why is there evil in the world if there's an intelligent designer?
First of all, I want to go back one step further. You were saying something about, and I'm paraphrasing, but whatever this intelligent thing is, creating us somehow or another in its image, or somehow or another thinking the way it thinks. How did you say that again?
Yeah, this was the idea of the early scientists who got science going. It was the way they've talked about it was the intelligibility of the universe. It was intelligible. It could be understood by us because our minds had been made in the image or likeness of the creator of the universe itself.
Isn't it just possible that our minds are complex and curious, and so we're trying to figure out what all these things are and what DNA is and what molecules and that? We're trying to figure out the very fiber of existence itself. What is it made out of? Wouldn't any curious, self-aware creature start to contemplate these things? And if it really is an intelligent force that made us to think the way it thinks, why would it have war? Why would it have murder? Why would it have all the horrific crimes that we see, drug addictions? Why would it create us in a form like that?
Yeah, so again, which is Meyer, what he's saying too, there's two totally separate things there. The first thing he goes into is, well, why is it so special that we're exploring our universe? Wouldn't any intelligent, creative creature try to figure out what DNA is and then this, that, and the other? There is, I guess it's a theme, a constantly repeated idea in skeptic circles, which I think really tries to demean humans. It tries to make us really not much better than anything else. There's no difference between us and a goldfish.
They touch on that later in this interview too.
Yeah, well, he says like, well, chimpanzees, have complex communication, and what about koalas or something? Koalas actually really stupid. That's a bad example. But
I think he says like whales and dolphins and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So he goes in, and that's about communication, and they'll talk about all sorts of different sort of behaviors, and they'll be like, well, but there are some things that you got to know. I mean, you start talking about the complexity of chimp or whale communication. Okay, that's fine. Would they ever write? There's no chimpanzee authored books out there. There's no whale authored books. What they ever build? You ever found a school?
Only in the multiverse.
Yeah, there you go. Look, here's how you can prove the great order of difference. This is Berlinski. Berlinski's great, by the way. Berlinski says, well, here's the deal. If there's ever somebody in a cage and somebody looking out of the cage, we're always the ones outside of the cage. That's true. No monkey ever built a cage, captured a human, and put them in it. There are so many ways that we are superior, and it's sort of annoying in a way to have them say like, well, any intelligent creature. What on earth? How do you just think intelligent creatures just pop up out of the ground at random? That's just a thing that happens on accident.
Well, yeah, I think
something with conscience that has a mind that works.
That's how the argument goes.
It's insanity, though. And even if you believe that argument, you're down to 2 or 3 options in a few billion years. If you believe everything they say, how many actual intelligent creatures capable of logical thought and communication, and architecture and literature. Well, now you're down to just humans. The idea that, well, any creature would be able to have that capacity. What are you talking about? that's just not true.
Eventually, with enough time, which he does get onto that and talks about how, it's not possible. Like, you're just going to destroy the code. I mean, he goes into the whole evolutionary process a good bit in this.
Yeah,
in
and
this
there's another guy I really like named James Tour. I don't know if you listen to Tour or not.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
But so James Tour, his whole deal is abiogenesis. Like, the thing that he just always just like punches.
He's
right
origin of life guy.
Yeah. So there's the idea that you have biogenesis. You have the genesis at the beginning of biotic things of biology, but it's abiotic. You go from abiotic to biotic. And he's like, no. The only place proteins get made are in a cell. Cells are made of proteins. That's a problem. Proteins never pop up anywhere except for in a cell where they are manufactured. How do you solve that? Science guys. And basically what he argues is there's no way you can ever get from biological chemistry to biological chemistry. And what he argues is that the time actually becomes an enemy, because you have to assume you have all these precursors and they're in the soup and all of a sudden a cell, which is crazy and insane on the face. But even making the assumptions, you have to have those things in that soup for a long time and keep rolling the dice to eventually hit that 1 in 10 billion where they kind of pop together the right way. But what he argues is the time becomes your enemy. You don't get that many rolls of the dice because everything breaks down. So once they're all formed and they're in the same space, you only got a few minutes. So time doesn't work as your ally anymore. And even the Darwinians, when they're being honest, will tell you that, like, and again, this is going with their explanations of everything. They look at the fossil record and you have like the Cambrian explosion where you go from like very, very few complex things to thousands upon thousands of complex things. And even they will like, it's hard to explain it all happens so fast.
So just for people that don't know what the Cambrian explosion is, it's a point in evolutionary past in the fossil record where you get all the major body plans of that time period, like all at once.
Yeah.
So I've heard kind of Darwinian, neo-Darwinists maybe say that, there is enough time to get that. But
then they'll come up with explanations like punctuated equilibrium. Yeah, we have equilibrium moments and like something happens. We don't really know what that something is.
See,
there's like radiation or there's like, I don't know what. The message goes out and then all the mutating starts and things start changing. And you get all this change that happens quickly at certain periods. It sounds like days of creation to me. But,
I know. That's the thing is I'm like, well, okay. Well, what is that punctuated equilibrium?
Yeah, why is equilibrium for millions of years and poof, there's a change and poof, there's a change? Yeah, it sounds like
it's very interesting. Yeah, so that's like part of
that's the first half of the critique,
and then the second one was around evil. And
the whole thing where he's just like, well, you should assume that anything should just be rational, be intelligent. We don't have any idea how a mind works or how one popped up or what consciousness is, and just assume that like. That should just happen randomly is, I think, a really, really bad underlying assumption. So that's the first half of his critique. And then the second half of that line of reasoning is, well, if there is a God who's so smart and designed everything, why war? Why cancer? I mean, right? That's sort of the question.
The problem of evil,
yeah. C.S. Lewis wrote a book, The Problem of Pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why is there pain in the universe and why is there death? And I mean, the classic Christian answer, and we were talking privately earlier, and this is just true. I really tend to default to the classical answers because I think the classical hundreds of years old, thousands of years old answers sometimes are still around because they're really strong. They're strong answers. If they were easily squashed and put in a corner, then they wouldn't still be the classical answer, Like I tend to default to the traditional classical answer until somebody really proves me wrong about something, or really, and sometimes I do change my opinion on things. I'm learning and grow, but the classical answer on this is that God didn't want puppets; He wanted free agents, and He gave us true free agency, and with actual true freedom, we abuse it. So it's not on God, the designer. There's these things. Now, then you say, well, couldn't God look forward and see the fact that you were going to do bad things with it? Yeah, I think He could. But I think in his infinite wisdom, he decided that the existence of real love, as opposed to just building robots who were like, we love you, because we have to, was worth that, and also real love amongst humans. And I mean, as Christians, we believe the great commandment, love God, love people. That's what God longs to see, is this growing, loving family of creatures, that what he's created, that to have that was worth the collateral damage. Now, you can question that if you want to.
Right.
It's not worth it. It's not, all this pain to get.
Well, and I've heard arguments around, it's even the things that we don't do. Like, there's obviously things that free will causes us pain, right? We choose bad stuff. But then there are things that people don't choose that are bad. But you could say, well, I mean, you could look at the sins of the father, as the generational thing. You could look, I mean, there's like all these other things in the Bible that kind of ferret that out a little bit more. I've also heard about, well, if the, I don't know if they get into it in this one. They maybe do touch on it in this conversation right here. But if the universe is finely tuned, as he talks about, then why is there so much death? Why is there millions of years of animals dying horrendous ways? And if you ever listen to Hugh Ross, he basically says,
just to unpack Hugh Ross, he is a biblical literalist, but he is not a young earther. Like he's
an older scientist.
He basically believes the days of creation are millions of years long.
Yeah, but man, he's so, just the way that he unpacks it. But he basically says, yeah, I mean, that was just, the fossil record is there for us to enjoy the benefits of the natural resources.
Sure.
So it's kind of an interesting take when you start to like back up and you look at, not looking at things in an isolated way, but looking at it in the context of like what we've been provided in order to get to where we are as a species and as a civil.
The Bible talks about like Jesus coming in the fullness of time.
Right.
And God's very patient, and he's willing to maybe even spend millions of years caressing things, and nudging them to get them to where that moment that he wants. Yeah. So just because we live in a very remarkable, special moment in the history of this universe, look, if you're a critic or a skeptic, you might say, well, that's awfully narcissistic. You think you're living in this Goldilocks moment, this Goldilocks place.
I mean, that's what
it kind of looks like, it doesn't it?
Well, we are. I mean,
we actually live. Yeah, that's right. We're
in an extended non ice age time in human civilization.
Sure. No, we're definitely in a good time to be. So yeah, all of that is true. Just regarding the again, sort of the problem with pain and evil issue. What I like to sort of land with all of that is to say, look, there are arguments to be made there, and that's. I think it might even be the strongest criticism of Christianity is what if you have a fully benevolent, all powerful God, why suffering? Again, my answer is because God wants real love to exist, and that can't exist with robots, and so he had to give us choice. But that does come with, at a cost. That's clearly true. My take would be that God thought it was worth the price. Now, regarding freedom and free will, you've got really two critics of free will. You have Christian critics of free will, sort of the Calvinist reform position, and you also have the atheist critics of free will. So the atheist critic of free will, who basically would say there's nothing on this earth or in this universe but physics and chemistry. Your brain is just a computer. You just have an illusion of consciousness. It's not real. They would argue, and you have an illusion of choice, but what you really are is a pinball going down a hill, and you just kind of bounce where you're supposed to and follow the path of least resistance. So, I think I chose my breakfast this morning, but what really happened is I've been pre-programmed by a lifetime of experience to think I want coffee in the morning because the culture I live in. And it just so happens that there's a Starbucks across the street from your office. And therefore on the way over, I grabbed, bacon Gruyere bites and a mocha.
Well, that's because I asked for bacon Gruyere bites.
Yeah, but I get them too. So, but the point, they would argue that's just like a path of least resistance choice. It's actually, if someone understood me well enough, they could predict that choice and I wouldn't actually have to make it, which is kind of true. My wife could have predicted that for you.
No,
my wife could have told you, is there a Starbucks within a mile or two? Yeah, he's going for a mocha and Gruyere bites. Like, she could have told you that.
Well,
right?
they actually talk about that in this interview. They talk about Rogan brings up, well, isn't it just determinism?
Right.
And how can you say, I mean, someone's going to do that. They're going to go, certain people are just going to do certain things and they're going to end up in jail, and other people are going to do certain things and not.
So that's a non-Christian, like, again, that's a secular look at determinism. And in what I would say to that is actually total agreement with what Stephen Meyer says. He says it more complicated. What I would basically say is that there are circumstances that make you more likely to do dumb things. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's because you didn't have a dad in your house to teach you properly. Maybe it's because you were poor and you didn't get to go to the right kind of school. Maybe it's just because you're drunk on a Friday night and you're angry because your girlfriend just left you. That there are certain kinds of circumstances that predispose you to doing something stupid, something violent,
like being a male.
Yeah, that's probably one of them. Well, that is why 90% of people in jail are male, I think, is because we are more predisposed, I think, to being violent.
Hold my beer.
So, but just because, whatever percentage of violence has the following things around it: alcohol, some sort of like personal trauma, anger thing that pushes you more towards a bad decision, just because, again, probably fatherlessness. I think 90% of men in jail are from single parent homes, so you've got a set of things that predispose you. That's true, but they are not sufficient to force you to do it, because you could find plenty of guys from single family homes who got drunk, whose girlfriend broke up with them, who didn't kill anybody. Mm-hmm. So to take away the dignity of humans to make a choice, I think is wrong. Which I think is what Meyer's getting at, which is to say, yes, there are predetermining factors. There are factors that seem to push you in the direction of making a bad choice, but you still choose. I think that's going to be the biblical perspective, and I think it's just the honest perspective. Because if that wasn't true, then how do you explain the people who don't do that, who have all the very same factors, who have that moment of anger when they're flushed and they could just do something really destructive, but something in them says, don't do it, man. That's wrong. And they're like, whew, and they step back from that precipice. Mm-hmm. And you could look at all sorts of negative sorts of behaviors with that, whether it be, I'm a Christian, about sins, or there's adultery or murder or whatever. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's predetermining things that push you towards it. You still get to make a choice. And I think that's what he's arguing. And regarding the Christian critique of free will, the Calvinist perspective, for my Calvinist friends out there, I love you, but I am definitely certainly not a Calvinist at all. Like I push back against that, because I agree with the classical Christian answer, which is that God wants to be loved by agents who chose to love him. Mm-hmm. I believe that, and I don't think that their answers regarding the problem of pain and death are as compelling.
There's a much bigger theological kind of like
that's a whole episode if you want to go down that path.
Yeah, I fit more. I'm definitely free will, but I think that both can be true with with another dimension of time, with God being in another dimension of time. I think foreknowledge it's not
causality.
Yes.
Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, click like and subscribe. It really helps us. And if you really enjoyed it, go on over to our website, thelandofthebible.com, and become a supporter. It helps us generate more content and gives you access to our full library of video and Bible study content.